So, the WNBA wants you to believe they've staged the greatest magic trick of the century. The league insists ratings are climbing, sponsors are flooding in, and suddenly the world can't get enough of women's basketball. But here's where the story bends. They've been caught slipping the real numbers under the rug, and everything unraveled the moment Caitlin Clark went down. The question is simple: who out there is really buying this act?
Popularity corresponds with a $2.2 billion TV rights deal the WNBA signed for 2026 that covers the next 11 years, which ESPN reports will increase the league's annual revenue by about $200 million a season. Yet, WNBA players say they're not being paid what they're owed. Right now, they get less than 10% of the league's total revenue, a strikingly slim margin when compared to other pro sports leagues in which athletes typically split revenues about 50.
Let's be honest for a moment. The WNBA has perfected one talent above all the rest, making it seem like things shine brighter than they really do. Recently, they've been busy dressing up their latest headline, bragging about ratings climbing, pretending attendance is exploding, and selling the dream that their future is untouchable. But when you peel back the layers, the truth doesn't match the picture. And then Caitlin Clark's injury arrived, the ultimate test, one they couldn't hide from.
The past 6 months, all we have been hearing about is how the WNBA is having a record-breaking event after another, and yet not paying its players a fair salary. The simple answer is the league is just not making enough money, and it's basically just been trying to stay afloat all these years. Well, until the $2.2 billion media rights deal it signed with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC just a couple of months ago. And of course, the announcement of the 3 new teams that will be added to the league in the next few years. That will all flush the WNBA with much needed cash. This, of course, coincides with the collective bargaining agreement that will be negotiated after the 2025 season. CNBC dug into the nuances of the league's business model to really see how likely it is that the salaries will match up to the influx of the cash in the next.
Now, the league loves to boast about that glittering $2.2 billion TV rights deal set to kick in by 2026. They spin it like ESPN, CBS, ABC, and every network under the sun just couldn't resist pouring billions into the hottest league in America. But here's the truth. The WNBA didn't truly earn it. The NBA flexed its muscle and cornered the networks. Adam Silver knew nobody was paying big money for a product fans barely watch, so he bundled it together. You want NBA games? Fine. But you're taking WNBA games too? No choice in the matter. That's not organic growth. It's a forced package, like being stuck with a landline nobody asked for just to get Wi-Fi.
$2.2 billion media rights deal out there.
There's rumor of it?
Reporting about the next media rights deal.
Then if you, I'm not great with numbers, low ball.
Why do you say that?
That's a low ball. You're saying how much?
2.2 billion over 11
Not
years.
enough. Not even close. Now, I'm not trying to inflate it a whole lot, but a 2's nice, and 8 would be better. That's what I'm talking about, because they know. They know. And we certainly have come along.
The league loves to parade this as proof of growth. But what it really screams is dependency. If the NBA ever yanked the cord, the WNBA would dissipate quicker than a politician's promise the morning after Election Day. That flashy $200 million per season figure floating around. It isn't revenue born from demand. It's a lifeline. Yet WNBA players treat it like their golden ticket. Suddenly, talk turns to doubling, tripling, even matching NBA salaries. And here's where the comedy writes itself. Right now, WNBA players take home less than 10% of league revenue, while NBA players split things closer to 50-50. On the surface, that gap feels unfair. But the detail they don't mention? The WNBA has never generated profit, not once. Year after year, the operation bleeds money, and the NBA quietly foots the bill. Yet somehow, players believe they deserve a slice of money that doesn't even exist.
The people who are owed nothing and worth nothing need to put on the shirt saying,
they are asking for 50% of negative numbers. Good luck turning that into a paycheck. And right on cue, politicians jumped into the mix. Because apparently, nothing screams urgent national crisis quite like making sure a WNBA benchwarmer grabs a bigger slice of imaginary pie. The Democratic Women's Caucus even fired off letters to the league demanding a so-called fair CBA, as if these players were coal miners, underpaid while risking their lives in the dark. But no, the truth is simpler. They are athletes in a league that couldn't survive a single month without NBA welfare. Yet Congress insists on painting them as victims of oppression.
WNBA players want as much money as the NBA players. So the NBA actually generates extreme amounts of revenue. Somebody wrote a joke about it. The WNBA wanted what their just pay was, and so they owe $400 million because that's really how it balances out. It's like a losing. It's never been profitable.
Now, let's talk ratings, because this is where the story gets interesting. After Caitlin Clark went down, the league had the perfect chance to prove all those big claims. We're bigger than one player, they said. She's not carrying the league. There are stars everywhere, and fans will watch no matter what. So what happened? According to the numbers they actually released, the WNBA averaged 969,000 viewers across ABC, ESPN, CBS, and ION. They popped champagne, acting like they just cracked the global sports code. It's the most watched season since 1998, they bragged. Sure, it sounds impressive, until you dig deeper. Because when Caitlin Clark is on the floor, the numbers soar. Without her, they sink. Take her Indiana team, 1.3 million viewers for one game on ION. The other 7 games without her, just 954,000 on average. That's a clear drop. The rest of the league without her, only 505,000, barely half. On CBS, Indiana with Clark pulled 1.8 million, while the rest managed 833,000. On ABC, Clark's games reached 2 million. The rest sat at just over 1 million. On ESPN, Clark drew 1.44 million. The rest, only 643,000. See the pattern? The growth isn't the league, it's one player. But here's where things start looking shady. Not every rating was reported. For games on ESPN and ABC, both owned by Disney, suddenly had no numbers at all. Just gone, like they never aired. Why did ESPN lose those numbers in the mail? Did some poor intern accidentally hit delete? Or maybe those games flopped so badly that releasing the truth would shatter the WNBA's hype machine. And let's be real, this wouldn't be the first time ESPN misplaced ratings. Remember when Pat McAfee's show crashed? Suddenly, ESPN just stopped sharing his numbers. Same playbook here. So while the WNBA struts around bragging about record growth, the truth sits right in plain sight. The games that actually deliver almost always feature Caitlin Clark. The ones that don't, buried, ignored, or conveniently unreported. Yet the league keeps insisting that star power is spread evenly across teams. Balanced? Please. That's like saying the Beatles were just another garage band. And then there's attendance. The league boasts that 7 teams averaged over 10,000 fans this season. Sounds impressive, right? Until you zoom in. The Minnesota Lynx, supposedly one of the league's powerhouse franchises, averaged just under 10,000 in an arena that holds twice that number, which means even in their strongest markets, seats sit empty, arenas are half full, and what they call success looks a lot like underperformance anywhere else. But in WNBA land, mediocrity gets dressed up and paraded as victory. And this is exactly why Caitlin Clark's injury became the league's worst nightmare. Because she isn't just another player. She's the oxygen tank keeping the whole operation alive. Without her, ratings slide, attendance dips, and that fragile illusion of success starts to crumble. But instead of owning up to the truth, the WNBA rolled out its latest PR campaign. See, ratings are still strong without her. Except once you peel away the spin, that so-called growth looks more like flatlined interest compared to the surge Caitlin Clark created on her own. And what about the players? They are treating this illusion of momentum like it's payday. Bigger contracts, private charter flights, revenue splits that don't even exist. Meanwhile, the product hasn't changed. The basketball is messy, the pace drags, and half the headlines aren't about competition at all. They're about off-court drama. Fans aren't tuning in for the fundamentals. They are tuning in for Caitlin Clark, the controversies, and the circus atmosphere the league itself fuels. But stop for a moment and ask yourself, if Caitlin Clark never entered the WNBA, what would this league look like right now? Would there be a $1 billion TV deal? Would attendance even be a conversation? Would politicians really be writing letters about revenue sharing? Or would the league still be quietly bleeding money, propped up by the NBA just to survive? And that's what makes the WNBA's ratings spin so frustrating. They are not just dressing up numbers. They are rewriting the very story of their survival. They want casual fans to believe women's basketball is finally breaking through, that the momentum is natural, that the support is broad, and that the wave can't be stopped. But the truth? It's artificial, fragile, and built almost entirely on one player's shoulders. Without her, the whole house of cards comes crashing down. Now, nobody's saying Caitlin Clark's injury means the league shuts down tomorrow. But what it does is rip the curtain back on the reality they've been hiding. The WNBA is still the league it has always been, dependent, subsidized, and hungry for validation. And as long as they keep hiding ratings, exaggerating growth, and demanding money they haven't earned, the gap between the story they tell and the truth underneath will only grow wider. So let's stick with this so-called growth myth the WNBA keeps selling. Because if there's one thing they do consistently, it's grab scraps of data, polish them until they shine, and hope no one ever checks what's inside the box. When they march around bragging about record ratings, they conveniently leave out the context. Yes, it's technically the most watched season since 1998. But here's what they never mention. Back in 1998, TV audiences everywhere were bigger because nobody had Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, or 500 other distractions fighting for attention. So using 1998 as a flex? It's laughable. It's like bragging you just beat your high score in a video game you haven't touched in 25 years. Cool story, but meaningless. And then there's that magical number they keep repeating, 969,000 average viewers. On the surface, sure, that doesn't sound terrible. But let's add perspective. That's basically the same draw as one random episode of a mid-tier cable reality show. We're talking reruns of Shark Tank on CNBC territory. The WNBA isn't competing with the NBA, NFL, or MLB. It's competing with 90 Day Fiancé and barely edging it out. If your league's biggest brag is beating a reality show about failed marriages, maybe pump the brakes on the "we're exploding" narrative. Now, let's circle back to those missing ratings on ESPN and ABC. This is where things get shady. Out of all the broadcast partners, only Disney's network somehow forgot to release 4 games worth of numbers. What a coincidence. Ask yourself, if those games had crushed it, do you think ESPN would have stayed quiet? Not a chance. They'd have plastered those stats across every press release they could find. And the fact they didn't, that tells you everything you need to know. Those games tanked. And instead of owning it, the league and their media partners quietly swept the evidence under the rug. And that, right there, is what drives normal fans crazy. Transparency matters. If the WNBA simply admitted, look, some games draw big crowds because of certain stars, and some don't, we're working on it, people might actually respect that honesty. But instead, they hide, they spin, they overhype every stat. And that's why fans roll their eyes whenever the league brags about progress. It doesn't feel earned, it feels manufactured. And then comes Caitlin Clark, who completely shatters the illusion. With her on the floor, numbers climb to respectable heights. Without her, they tumble back into niche curiosity. She is the product, whether the league admits it or not. But instead of embracing her impact and building around it, they downplay her role. They act like she's just another piece of the puzzle. Right. That's like saying Michael Jordan was just another guy on the Bulls. Honestly, it's sad watching the league bite the very hand that feeds it. Caitlin Clark is the reason they matter, yet they treat her like she's replaceable. They keep pushing other names, Bonner, Stewart, Wilson, Thomas, as if casual fans care. News flash, they don't. The numbers make it crystal clear. Without Caitlin, the hype evaporates. But the league insists on lying to itself, pretending fans are buying into the full product. They are not. They are showing up for her. Period. And here's the bigger issue, the question that lingers over everything: sustainability. Sure, you can spin one season into a shiny success story, but what about 5 years from now? What happens when Caitlin Clark isn't the fresh new face anymore? What if she gets hurt again, or the magic wears off? Who carries the league then? The sad truth is, nobody. Because the WNBA hasn't built a foundation. It's not stability, it's a wave, and waves always crash. You can already see the cracks spreading. Attendance outside Indiana, spotty at best. Teams brag about sellouts, but a sellout in a 10,000-seat arena isn't exactly jaw-dropping, especially when those numbers include freebies or deep discounts just to fill empty chairs. And the TV side, even more fragile. One superstar can't carry ratings forever. If the networks stop caring, those billions vanish overnight, and suddenly the WNBA is back on life support, begging the NBA to keep the lights on. And speaking of money, let's circle back to player demands, because this part borders on comedy. WNBA players see that $2.2 billion TV deal and instantly assume it means fatter paychecks. They want a bigger cut, more perks, and salaries that look like their NBA counterparts. But here's the kicker. They don't seem to realize that none of this money actually comes from demand for their product. It's forced. It's bundled. It's charity disguised as progress. Think about it. If the WNBA were truly worth $200 million a season, why didn't the networks ever step up with that deal on their own? Why did it take Adam Silver twisting arms behind the scenes to force it through? Because the demand simply isn't there. Fans aren't begging for more games. ESPN isn't scrambling to book primetime WNBA doubleheaders. The numbers don't justify it. Yet somehow, the players walk around like they've earned this massive payday. That's entitlement at its finest. They see NBA players splitting revenue 50-50 and assume they deserve the same. But here's the reality. The NBA generates billions in profit. The WNBA does not. It's like comparing a kid's lemonade stand to Starbucks and demanding the same paycheck. And the second you point this out, suddenly you're branded the bad guy. You're anti-women. You don't support equality. But no, it's not about gender, it's about math. If the money isn't there, you can't spend it. End of story. Which brings us right back to Caitlin Clark's injury. That moment was the league's chance to finally prove it wasn't just a one-player show. And what happened? They failed. Ratings dropped. Excitement cooled. Even the media coverage started fading away. The only stories people seemed to care about were off-court drama, political noise, or the league's carefully packaged spin about growth. The basketball itself? Practically irrelevant. And that should terrify them. Because real sports leagues thrive when the game is the star. The NFL doesn't need one player to keep it alive. Neither does the NBA, the MLB, or the NHL. Sure, stars matter, but the league itself stands strong. The WNBA, though, it collapses without Caitlin Clark. That's not stability. That's a circus tent held up by a single pole. And if you take away the pole, the whole thing comes crashing down. At the end of the day, this league isn't panicking just because Caitlin Clark got hurt. They are panicking because her injury ripped the mask off and exposed everything they've been hiding. The ratings spin, the attendance fluff, the illusion of growth. It all unraveled the second their golden goose went down. And the scariest part for them, deep down, they know it. They know that without her, this so-called success story is nothing more than smoke and mirrors.